You think Diddy's going to get off, or you think what are we looking like?
I think the prosecution is doing a great job. They need to keep up the good work.
Sean Diddy Combs might actually be facing life in prison, and after seeing the receipts that just dropped, it's clear to see why. Let's break it down, because between the leaked images, the freaky dungeon allegations, the testimony, the former Butler / concubine, and the literal bags of baby oil and drugs, it's no longer just rumors, it's evidence. And it's chilling. On day 8 of the trial, we learned that law enforcement agents had executed multiple raids on Diddy's properties, including his luxury hotel suite and private residences. What they uncovered was nothing short of shocking. When the prosecution presented the evidence in court, it sent ripples through the courtroom and the public alike. Inside the hotel room, authorities found bags upon bags of baby oil. And yeah, that might sound odd at first, but it's not just baby oil. Prosecutors explained that this was linked to the alleged freak dungeon, a secretive, locked-off area reportedly used for disturbing and coercive acts. The baby oil was just part of the disturbing paraphernalia found on site, alongside other items like handcuffs, restraints, and devices that suggested the space was set up for controlling and exploiting victims. But the real shocker came with the seizure of large quantities of illicit substances, drugs that reportedly were distributed and used to manipulate and subdue people inside Diddy's inner circle. The prosecution laid out how these drugs weren't just for personal use, but part of a systematic operation to keep people compliant and quiet. Photos taken during the raids were introduced as key exhibits, images showing the disarray and the grim reality of the spaces, with bags of suspicious substances, makeshift prison-like setups, and an array of materials that painted a grim picture of what was happening behind closed doors. The courtroom buzzed as prosecutors walked the jury through each piece of evidence, connecting the dots between the items found and the testimonies given by former employees, witnesses, and of course the Butler concubine who revealed the hidden lifestyle inside Diddy's properties. One particularly haunting piece was a photo of a dimly lit room, fitted with heavy chains and locked gates, the so-called dungeon. Prosecutors argued this was the physical embodiment of the control and abuse that victims endured. The defense, meanwhile, struggled to explain away these images as mere rumors or misunderstandings. The raids also uncovered detailed logs and communications indicating a calculated effort to hide the true nature of the activities taking place. Digital evidence, like text messages and recorded calls, were presented to show how Diddy and his associates allegedly orchestrated the concealment of these illegal operations. All of this combined shifted the narrative drastically, from whispers and rumors to hard, tangible proof. The raid didn't just gather evidence, it cracked open the door to a sinister underworld that the public had no idea existed. This evidence became a cornerstone in the prosecution's case, dramatically raising the stakes and making it clear that this wasn't just a celebrity scandal, but a serious criminal investigation with life-altering implications for Sean Combs. Now, let's talk about the testimony that shocked everyone in the courtroom, Cassie's. If you thought you knew the story, think again. Cassie's testimony peeled back the curtain on a world so dark and twisted that it left the entire jury visibly stunned. Cassie didn't just speak about ordinary allegations. She described a chilling, deeply disturbing environment where manipulation, control, and abuse were routine. According to her, behind the glitz and glamour, Sean Combs' properties weren't just places of luxury, they were cages. She detailed how victims were coerced into a secret dungeon, a hidden chamber allegedly used to detain and psychologically torture those who crossed the line or tried to escape. Cassie explained the layout, describing locked doors, soundproof walls, and heavy chains, creating a prison-like atmosphere that felt more like a nightmare than a celebrity hideaway. The jury was visibly shaken, and even the judge appeared taken aback by the graphic and emotional nature of her testimony. It was clear this was not just a simple legal battle. It was exposing a dark underbelly of exploitation and abuse that many never expected from someone like Sean Combs. Her words gave a voice to those who had been silenced and painted a vivid picture of the terrifying reality inside Diddy's world. The impact of her testimony was so profound that it became a turning point in the trial, pushing the jury to see beyond the surface and confront the grim truth. Alright, now let's get into one of the most jaw-dropping parts of this whole saga, because this isn't just hearsay or secondhand gossip. This is coming straight from a man who was inside Diddy's world like no one else. According to the reports from court testimonies, this guy wasn't just some random employee or assistant. He was literally Diddy's butler and his concubine. Yeah, you heard that right. This man spent years working closely with Sean Combs, running errands, managing personal affairs, and essentially being at Diddy's beck and call 24/7. But behind the scenes, his role went way beyond that. He describes being pulled into a toxic, twisted relationship where the boundaries between employer and servant, power and submission were completely blurred. He says that Diddy treated him like an object, used him not only for traditional butler duties, but also for personal, intimate reasons, often under coercion and intense psychological pressure. This wasn't a relationship built on respect or consent, but one grounded in fear and control. What's even more chilling is what he revealed about the atmosphere inside Diddy's estate. He spoke about a constant, oppressive environment where celebrities and others were brought into a kind of shadowy inner circle, an underground world filled with drugs, manipulation, and unspeakable acts. He described witnessing parties where people were kept in line through intimidation and surveillance. Cameras were everywhere, tracking movements like prisoners under watch, ensuring that no one stepped out of line or exposed the house of horrors they lived in. This former butler recounted multiple incidents where individuals, some unwilling, were forced into scenarios involving drugs and other substances, often passed around like currency to maintain silence and loyalty. More than once, he expressed his deep regret and pain over not being able to help others trapped inside that web. He said he saw people who came in full of hope and excitement, but left broken, shattered, and haunted. It's important to note that his testimony isn't just an isolated claim. It aligns with other accusations and evidence we've seen so far. The photos released by prosecutors, the drug and baby oil caches, and Cassie's courtroom revelations about the freak dungeon. All of these pieces together paint a disturbing mosaic of a man who used his celebrity status and immense power to build an empire on exploitation. And this butler turned whistleblower? He looks like a man who's carrying the weight of everything he's witnessed. He's haunted, fragile, and broken. His story is one of survival, but also a call to expose what's been hidden for far too long. If his account is true, and with everything else that's come out, it's hard to deny, it could be one of the most damning pieces of evidence yet against P. Diddy. He describes being forced to participate in, and sometimes even facilitate, parties that were anything but glamorous. These were late-night events shrouded in secrecy, with no phones allowed, and heavily guarded doors. Behind them, acts of violence, exploitation, and manipulation. What he saw, and was sometimes made to endure, was so graphic and traumatizing that parts of his statement had to be sealed in court due to their explicit content. He talks about being on call 24/7, not just for errands or house management, but for personal and deeply invasive tasks. He was allegedly ordered to monitor certain guests, report back on their behavior, and even prepare rooms and substances for private encounters. He wasn't just a servant. He was a prisoner with a nice suit. What's especially chilling is how he describes Diddy's psychological control. He says that fear was used like a weapon. Fear of being blackballed in the industry, fear of violence, fear of being exposed or humiliated. And he wasn't alone. According to him, there were others, young men and women, who played similar roles, locked in this twisted web of silence and submission. Even more shocking, he said Diddy would often film everything. Dozens of hidden cameras were allegedly placed around the properties, including in private rooms and bathrooms, capturing footage that was used to control or blackmail individuals later on. And now, some of those tapes may finally be in the hands of the prosecution. He was eventually able to escape, barely, but not before suffering immense emotional and psychological damage. And now, years later, he's stepping forward, not just to expose Diddy, but to help give closure to others who've been trapped in that same system of fear and abuse. What makes this testimony even more damning is that it corroborates many of the allegations made by Cassie and other alleged victims. It's no longer one person's word, it's a pattern, repeated again and again. Now, social media has already passed judgment. People are calling him the next Epstein, the next R. Kelly, but worse. And to be real, the pattern is familiar. Powerful man, untouchable for years. Then the victims speak up and suddenly the walls start caving in. But the difference this time? There's video, there's testimony, and there's forensics. And the feds didn't just come in lightly. You don't bring in Homeland Security unless the government is trying to make an example out of someone. Diddy hasn't been officially charged yet, but insiders say indictments are imminent. With all this evidence stacking up, it's starting to look like he's not walking away from this one. If convicted on multiple counts, especially related to human trafficking, drugs, and abuse, he could be facing life behind bars. The man who used to call himself Brother Love might be spending the rest of his life in a federal cell. And honestly, if all this is true, that might be exactly where he belongs. Let me know what you think in the comments. Is this the final fall of one of hip-hop's biggest moguls? Or is this another case of media spin gone wild? Either way, this story's not over, and I'll be here to break it down every step of the way. Smash that like button if you think justice is finally catching up to the powerful. Subscribe for more updates, and have a wonderful day.